Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to walk you through the body of Chapter 4. In this chapter we'll be looking at the payroll process within Sage 50. You'll see how payroll is set up, how to add individual employees, and how to process paychecks for a couple of employees already in the system, one salaried and one hourly. We won't actually build the payroll system from scratch here. That comes later in Chapter 15 when we take a deeper dive. For now, this is just an introduction to how payroll works and how it connects to the rest of the accounting system. So let's jump in and take a look at how this works inside of Sage. So I am on the landing page when you open up Sage, and I need to get into my Bellwether Garden Supply. So I'm going to click on Open an Existing Company. And from the list here, you're going to see Bellwether. Take a look at the timestamp. If you have multiple bellwethers, make sure you're selecting the latest one, which includes the information from Chapter 3. To verify that the company file that you opened has the latest information from Chapter 3 in it, if you run the Reports and Forms from the drop-down menu here and then select Accounts Receivable category, you're going to look for your Customer Ledgers report. I'm going to double-click on that to open it up. From this Customer's Ledgers report, we are going to see a few transactions from Chapter 3 that we entered. So just verifying that we're using the correct report here. So we're looking for the sales to dash, the sales invoice to dash that was recorded on March 1st, the amount of $211.95. So that should be in your company file. Verify that it is. And then if I scroll down to the customer Teasdale, there should be several transactions related to them that we entered. We're going to see two sales invoices that we recorded, one for $158.95, the other one for $317.99. And then we're going to see the two cash receipts from Teasdale, and there's going to be 4 line items related to that. One's going to be for the $158.95 invoice that we recorded, and then the discount related to that. And then the other one's going to be for the $317.99 invoice, and then the discount related to that. And be careful that the discount amounts match up with what you're seeing here, because we had to manually do that calculation. So that's a common mistake. And then you can look at your totals here, and you should see the same 3 totals of the total account receivable balance here in the balance column, and then we have the total of the debits and the total of the credits during this period of time of March. So all 3 figures should match yours. That might be the fastest way to check to see if you're on track with respect to the end of Chapter 3 before we get started in Chapter 4. Alright, and to transition into payroll, from the navigational menu here, we are going to select Employees and Payroll. So when you're setting up payroll within Sage, you usually would start by going to the Payroll Setup button here and then clicking on Payroll Settings. Then you get a little wizard that pops up that walks you through the process of setting up the payroll system for your company. Because we're using the sample company though, the payroll settings have already been set up, so we're not going to be doing that in this chapter. When we get into Chapter 15, we'll dive deeper into the payroll process, and we will go through this payroll settings wizard, and you'll also have an opportunity to try that on your own when we do our second project in the course. So for right now though, I'm just going to cancel out of this wizard. After going through the payroll setup wizard, you would also need to go into this employees area and then set up the employee defaults. And from here we can make many settings changes related to our employees. Primarily what we're going to be seeing later on when we go into the deeper dive into payroll is looking at these employee fields and company fields tabs. On the employee fields tabs, we're seeing how different withholdings are being mapped. Things like federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare. Each of these deductions comes out of the employee's paycheck and should normally be linked to separate general ledger liability accounts. But if you look closely here, all 3 of those items, federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare, are actually pointing to the same account number. That's probably not ideal because it means all those different liabilities are being lumped together instead of being tracked separately. In Chapter 15, when we do the deep dive, I know that we'll set this up correctly and separate those out. but for right now we're going to leave these as is. On the Company Fields tab, we're seeing the employer side of payroll, the company's payroll tax expenses and related liabilities. These are things like the employer share of Social Security and Medicare, FUTA, and state unemployment. And again, it looks like all of those are being mapped to the same liability account and the same expense account. That's definitely not how you'd want to set it up in a real world situation, since each of those taxes should have its own line item for clear tracking and reporting. But we're not going to change any of it right now. I just wanted you to notice how it's set up so you can start thinking critically about how payroll mapping connects to the general ledger. But for right now, I'm just going to cancel out of the screen. So after going through the payroll setup wizard and setting up the employee and company defaults, our next step would be to set up individual employees. So to do that, I click on the Employees button and select New Employee. So in this screen, we can see that there are several different tabs. The first one, labeled General, looks like we're going to be entering employee ID numbers, name, address, and so on. Additional info's got some emergency contacts, some information about their title and the department they're located in, their supervisor, and so on and so forth. If I click on Pay Information, here's where I'd indicate if they're paid hourly or salary, how often they're paid, and so on, as well as their hourly pay rate if they're paid hourly, or their salary if they're paid salary. On the Withholding Info tab, we'd enter information from the employee's W-4 form that we would have them fill out when we hired them. That W-4 form spells out the withholdings that'll come out of the employee's paycheck. You can see here we have check boxes for if the person has multiple jobs. Here we have drop-down menus indicating their filing status on their tax returns. Since we're using Sage 50 2022, but our book was using Sage 50 2019, the W-4 was changed significantly with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And so that's why this checkbox exists for employees as W-4 prior to 2020, because you'll notice that for the federal income tax, I can't specify the allowances, withholding allowances, but if I check that box, then I could do that. But for right now, we're not going to be entering any employee information, just sort of taking a look at what's out there. So we can go through quickly here and take a look at these other tabs again. So vacation, sick time, we've got some information about how many hours they get of that per year. And then once again, we saw some information earlier with the employee and company defaults. This is being mapped to each individual employee, so we're seeing a little redundancy here. We wouldn't want to do this individually for each employee though. That's why we'd set up those mappings in the employee default area. But in case we did have other deductions that maybe were specific to this employee, then we could set them up for that individual employee here. All of the payroll that we're going to run this chapter is going to be on employees that are already in the system though, so I'm going to close out of this window. Before we run the payroll for the two companies described within the chapter, we're going to make a general journal entry to show a transfer of funds from the business's regular checking account to its other checking account, which they've labeled the payroll checking account. And it's actually a pretty common practice for business to keep payroll in a separate account, since it helps them track that activity more easily, ensures there's always enough set aside to cover employee paychecks. And actually that's what we're going to do here with this journal entry, is make sure there is enough set aside. So the entry is described on page 141 of our text. And it says that we're transferring $8,000 from regular checking to the payroll checking account. So to do that, to get to our general journal, we have a shortcut here in the navigational menu. Also under tasks, you can find it there, general journal entry. So the date of this entry per the book is March 29th. So I'm going to click on the calendar here and select that. Remember that you might be showing a different year, and that's totally fine. In the reference field, we're going to type the word transfer. And here we are making a journal entry. So I'm going to indicate the account that is debited first, and we are transferring into the payroll checking account. That's an asset account, and since we're transferring into it, it's increasing, and therefore it should be debited. So I'm going to find that account by clicking on the general ledger account and then clicking on the magnifying lens. I can find the payroll checking account there. The amount is $8,000. And then the account that we're transferring from is the regular checking account. So I'm going to find that. And if you think about the logic here, the regular checking account is going to have less in it because we're transferring from it. It's an asset, so it should be credited to decrease it. And now we can see that the journal entry is in balance, and we can save the transaction. The screen clears, and now we can close out of the window. So now that we have enough funds in that payroll checking account, we're going to cut a couple of paychecks for some employees. And to do that, we're going to click on the Pay Employees button, and then we're going to select Enter Payroll for one employee. So we're going to be paying our first employee, which is Brandy Nunley. This is described on page 142 of our text. So to find that employee, I click on this magnifying lens and look for their name. So Brandy Nunley. And what I need to do here is I need to specify the date of the paycheck. Per the book, this is on March 29th. So click on that calendar, find the 29th. And then also with paychecks, got to make sure that you specify the date of the check, but also the date that the pay period ends on. And they said that the pay period ended on the 29th of March as well. So make sure that we select that. So that's a common mistake, to not change both of those dates. So make sure that you're paying attention to both of those dates. And you can see here that once we put that information in about Brandy Nunley, we can see that Brandy is a salaried employee, and we have taxes being withheld and other deductions being withheld from the paycheck, and then we can see the amount of the net pay after the deductions. So this is the gross pay before deductions, this is the net pay after deductions. Now we're not going to be printing any of these paychecks, so because of that we're going to manually type in the check number here. And the text says we're using 1,294 as the check number. So now that information is on screen. The net pay matches the text, so make sure your does as well. And now we're going to save the paycheck. So our next employee that we're going to create a paycheck for is going to be named Drake Carter. So click on the magnifying lens and find D. Carter there. And you can see once we did that this information filled out here, and it looks like D. Carter is paid hourly. And per the book, they had 80 hours of regular and 3 hours of overtime. So I'm going to put in those overtime hours. And I can see here the gross pay as well as the deductions as well as the net pay. And it looks like my net pay matches up with the text. And you also notice that because we entered that other check number a moment ago, that it auto-filled with the next subsequent number in this paycheck. And if yours didn't fill, make sure to put the check number of 1,295 for D. Carter here. And also the dates should be March 29th for the date of the check and March 29th for the pay period end. So verify that, and once you have, click Save to record the transaction. So now I'm going to close out of this window. There are many ways to look at those paychecks that we just created. We could go to the general ledger and find the payroll checking account and then look at the activity in there and find those net pays. Alternatively, since we're on the employees and payroll screen here, if we select this payroll check register, and this is a report, and if we view it, we can see that the transactions shown are between the March 1st and March 31st. The transactions that we just recorded were on March 29th, so I'm going to scroll down the page because they're chronologically arranged, and we see those two checks, 1,294, 1,295. If I wanted to go back and look at any of the detail on those checks, I could double click on the amount here. And here I see that information about check 1,294 again. If I wanted to take a look at the journal entry behind the scenes of this transaction, I could click on this journal button. And here I see a compound journal entry that is both showing the payment of the salary to the employee as well as the company's payroll taxes. So it's a combination of those two journal entries. In Principles of Accounting 1, we usually separate those entries out, but they combine them here. You can see that it includes both because you're seeing things like Social Security in there twice, and you're also seeing FUTA, stuff like that. So you can scroll down, you can see all those withholdings as well as additional liabilities to the company because it has employees. And if we keep scrolling down, we'll see the amount of the net pay coming out of the payroll checking account. Once again, when they set up the mapping of the company defaults and employee defaults, they had specified the same account number for all these different withholdings. So it's definitely not what we want to do in real life, but the text doesn't get into that for right now. We're going to save that for Chapter 15 in Project 2. And that actually brings us to the end of Chapter 4. Now it's your turn in Exercise 4.1 to record a paycheck for an hourly employee, and then in Exercise 4.2, you'll record another paycheck, this time for a salaried employee. And when you enter those paychecks, make sure that you specify the date of the paycheck as well as the date that the pay period ends on. And then also manually type in the check numbers per the book. Once you're done with that, you're going to create a report. It's going to be the payroll check register. I'll be able to see those two checks that I demonstrated a moment ago, as well as the two checks that are in the exercises. And that is your only submission for the chapter. Once you've recorded those two additional paychecks in the exercises, make sure to do a backup of your company just in case we have any future problems. If you have any questions at all, reach out.